Chapter 6. Mama, mama, help me get home. I'm out in the woods, I am out on my own. I found me a werewolf, a nasty old mutt. It showed me its teeth and went straight for my gut. Mama, mama, help me get home. I'm out in the woods, I am out on my own. I was stopped by a vampire, a rotting old wreck. It showed me its teeth and went straight for my neck. Mama, mama, put me to bed. I won't make it home, I'm already half dead. I met an invalid and fell for his art. He showed me his smile and went straight for my heart. From A Child's Walk Home, Nursery Rhymes and Folk Tales, edited by Corey Levinson. That evening I can't concentrate. When I'm setting the table for dinner, I accidentally pour wine in Gracie's juice cup and orange juice in my uncle's wine glass, and while I'm grating cheese I catch my knuckles so many times in the teeth of the grater my aunt finally sends me out of the kitchen saying she'd prefer not to have a topping of skin for her ravioli. I can't stop thinking about the last thing Alex said to me, the endlessly shifting pattern of his eyes, the strange expression on his face like he was inviting me. Around 8:30 the sky looks like it's on fire, especially at Back Cove. You should really see it. Is it even remotely, conceivably possible he was sending me a message? Is it possible he was asking me to meet him? The idea makes me dizzy. I keep thinking, too, about the single word directed low and quietly straight into my ear gray. He was there. He saw me. He remembered me. So many questions crowd my brain at once, it's like one of the famous Portland fogs has swept up from the ocean and settled there, making it impossible to think normal functional thoughts. My aunt finally notices something's wrong. Just before dinner I'm helping Jenny with her homework as always, testing her on her multiplication tables. We're sitting on the floor of the living room which is squashed up right next to the dining room, an alcove that barely holds a table and 6 chairs, and I'm holding her workbook on my knees reciting the problems to her, but my mind is on autopilot and my thoughts are a million miles away. Or rather, they're exactly 3.4 miles away, down at the marshy edge of Back Cove. I know the distance exactly because it's a nice run from my house. Now I'm calculating how quickly I could get down there on my bike, and then beating myself up for even considering the idea. 7 times 8. Jenny pinches her lips together. 56. 9 times 6. 52. On the other hand, there's no law that says you can't speak to a cured. Cureds are safe. They can be mentors or guides to the uncureds. Even though Alex is only a year older than I am, we're separated irreparably and totally by the procedure. He might as well be my grandfather. 7 times 11. 77. Lena. My aunt has squeezed out of the kitchen, past the dining room table, and is standing behind Jenny. I blink twice trying to focus. Carol's face is tight with concern. Is something the matter? No, I drop my eyes quickly. I hate it when my aunt looks at me like that, like she's reading all the bad parts from my soul. I feel guilty just for thinking about a boy, even a cured one. If she knew, she would say, "Oh Lena. Careful. Remember what happened to your mother." She would say, "These diseases tend to run in the blood." Why? I keep my eyes trained on the worn carpet underneath me. Carol bends forward, swoops up Jenny's workbook from my knees, and says loudly in her clear, high voice, 9 times 6 is 54. She snaps the workbook closed. Not 52, Lena. I assume you know your multiplication tables. Jenny sticks her tongue out at me. My cheeks start heating up as I realize my mistake. Sorry. I guess I'm just kind of distracted. There's a momentary pause. Carol's eyes never leave the back of my neck. I can sense them burning there. I feel like I'll scream or cry or confess if she keeps staring at me. Finally she sighs. You're still thinking about the evaluations, aren't you? I blow the air out of my cheeks, feel a weight of anxiety ease off my chest. Yeah. I guess so. I venture a glance up at her, and she smiles her little skittering smile. I know you're disappointed you have to go through the process again. But think about it this way, this time you'll be even more prepared. I bob my head and try to look enthusiastic, even though a little, pinching feeling of guilt starts nipping at me. I haven't even thought about the evaluations since this morning, not since I found out the results would be discounted. Yeah, you're right. Come on now. Dinner time. My aunt reaches out and passes a finger over my forehead. Her finger is cool and reassuring and gone as quickly as the lightest stirring of wind. It makes the guilt flare up full force, and in that moment I can't believe I was even considering going to Back Cove. It's the absolute 100% wrong thing to do, and I stand up for dinner feeling clean and weightless and happy, like the first time you feel healthy after a long fever. But at dinner my curiosity and with it, my doubts return. I can barely follow the conversation. All I can think is go. Don't go. Go. Don't go. At one point my uncle is telling a story about one of his customers and I notice everyone is laughing, so I laugh too, but a little too loud and long. Everyone turns to look at me, even Gracie, who puckers her nose and tilts her head like a dog sniffing at something new. Are you okay, Lena? My uncle asks, adjusting his glasses as though hoping to bring me into clearer focus. You seem a little strange. I'm fine. I push around some ravioli on my plate. Normally I can put away half a box myself, especially after a long run, and still have room for dessert, but I've barely managed to choke down a few bites. Just stressed. Leave her alone, my aunt says. She's upset about the evaluations. They didn't exactly turn out as planned. She lifts her eyes to my uncle, and they exchange a quick glance. I feel a rush of excitement. It's rare for my aunt and uncle to look at each other like that, a wordless glance full of meaning. Most of the time their interactions are limited to the usual thing. My uncle tells stories about work, my aunt tells stories about the neighbors. What's for dinner? There's a leak in the roof. Blah blah blah. I think that for once they're going to mention the Wilds and the invalids. But then my uncle gives a minute shake of his head. These kinds of mix-ups happen all the time, he says, staking a ravioli with his fork. Just the other day, I asked Andrew to reorder 3 cases of Vicks orange juice. But he goes and gets the codes wrong, and guess what shows up? 3 cases of baby formula. I said, Andrew. I tuned the conversation out again, grateful that my uncle is a talker and happy that my aunt has taken my side. The one good thing about being kind of shy is that nobody bugs you when you want to be left alone. I lean forward and sneak a glance at the clock in the kitchen. 7:30, and we haven't even finished eating. And afterward I'll have to help clear and wash the dishes, which always takes forever. The dishwasher uses up too much electricity, so we have to do them by hand. Outside, the sun is streaked with filaments of gold and pink. It looks like the candy that gets spun at the Sugar Shack downtown, all gloss and stretch and color. It will be a beautiful sunset tonight. In that moment the urge to go is so strong, I have to squeeze the sides of my chair to keep from suddenly springing up and running out the door. Finally I decide to stop stressing and leave it to luck, or fate, or whatever you want to call it. If we finish eating and I'm done cleaning up the dishes in time to make it to Back Cove, I'll go. If not, I'll stay. I feel a million times better once I've made the decision, and even managed to shovel down a few more bites of ravioli before Jenny, miracle of miracles, has a sudden late burst of speed and cleans her plate, and my aunt announces I can clear the dishes whenever I'm ready. I stand up and start stacking everyone's plates. It's almost 8 o'clock. Even if I can wash all the dishes in 15 minutes, and that's a stretch, it will still be difficult to get to the beach by 8:30. And forget about making it back by 9 o'clock, when the city has a mandated curfew for uncureds. And if I got caught on the streets after curfew? The truth is, I don't know what would happen. I've never broken curfew. Just as I've finally accepted that there's no way to get to Back Cove and back in time, my aunt does the unthinkable. As I'm reaching forward to take her plate, she stops me. You don't have to clean the dishes tonight, Lena. I'll do them. As she's speaking, she reaches out and puts a hand on my arm. Just like earlier, the touch is as fleeting and cool as wind. And before I can think about what this means, I'm blurting out, actually, I have to run to Hannah's house really quick. Now. A look of alarm or suspicion flickers across my aunt's face. It's nearly 8 o'clock. I know. She has a study guide she was supposed to give me. I just remembered. Now the look of suspicion, it is suspicion, definitely makes itself comfortable, drawing Carol's eyebrows together, cinching her lips. You don't have any of the same classes. And your boards are over. How important can it be? It's not for class. I roll my eyes, trying to conjure up Hannah's nonchalance, even though my palms are sweating and my heart is jerking around in my chest. It's like a guide full of pointers. For the evaluations. She knows I need to prep more, since I almost choked yesterday. Again, my aunt directs a small glance at my uncle. Curfew's in an hour, she says to me. If you get caught out after curfew. Nervousness makes my temper flare. I know about curfew, I snap. I've only been hearing about it for my whole life. I feel guilty the second that the words are out of my mouth, and I drop my eyes to avoid looking at Carol. I've never spoken back to her, have always tried to be as patient and obedient and good as possible, have always tried to be as invisible as possible, a nice girl who helps with the dishes and the little kids and does her homework and listens and keeps her head down. I know that I owe Carol for taking Rachel and me in after my mother died. If it wasn't for her, I'd probably be wasting away in one of the orphanages, uneducated, unnoticed, destined for a job at a slaughterhouse, probably cleaning up sheep guts or cow crap or something like that. Maybe. If I was lucky, I'd get to work for a cleaning service. No foster parent will adopt a child whose past has been tainted by the disease. I wish I could read her mind. I have no idea what she's thinking, but she seems to be analyzing me, attempting to read my face. I think I'm not doing anything wrong, it's harmless, I'm fine, over and over, and wipe my palms on the back of my jeans, positive I'm leaving a sweat mark. Be quick, she says finally, and as soon as the words are out of her mouth I'm off, jetting upstairs and switching my sandals for sneakers. Then I bang back down the stairs and fly out the door. My aunt has barely had time to take the dishes into the kitchen. She calls something to me as I blur past her, but I'm already pushing out the front door, and don't catch what she says. The ancient grandfather clock in the living room starts booming out just as the screen door swings shut behind me. 8 o'clock. I unlock my bike and pedal it down the front path and out into the street. The pedals creak and moan and shudder. This bike was owned by my cousin Marcia before me and must be at least 15 years old, and leaving it outside all year isn't doing anything to preserve it. I start cruising in the direction of Back Cove, which is downhill fortunately. The streets are always pretty empty at this time of night. For the most part, the Kurds are inside sitting at dinner or cleaning up or preparing for bed and another night of dreamless sleep, and all the young Kurds are home or on their way there nervously watching the minutes swirl away toward 9 o'clock curfew. My legs are still aching from my run earlier today. If I make it to Back Cove on time and Alex is there, I'm going to be a complete mess, sweaty and disgusting. But I keep going anyway. Now that I'm out of the house I push all my doubts and questions out of my mind and focus on hauling ass as fast as my cramping legs will allow me, spinning down through the vacant streets toward the cove, taking every shortcut I can think of, watching the sun descend steadily toward the blazing gold line of the horizon as though the sky a brilliant, electric blue at this point is water, and the light is just sinking through it. I've only been out at this hour a few times on my own and the feeling is strange, frightening and exhilarating at the same time, like talking to Alex out in the open earlier this afternoon. As though the revolving eye that I know is always watching has been blinded just for a fraction of a second, as though the hand you've been holding your whole life suddenly disappears and leaves you free to move in any direction you want. Lights sputter in windows around me, candles and lanterns mostly. This is a poor area, and everything is rationed, especially gas and electricity. At a certain point I lose sight of the sun's position beyond the 4- and 5-story buildings, which grow more densely packed after I turn onto Preble, tall, skinny, dark buildings, pressed up against one another as though already preparing for winter and huddling for warmth. I haven't really got about what I'll say to Alex, and the idea of standing alone with him suddenly makes my stomach bottom out. I have to pull my bike up abruptly, stop and catch my breath. My heart is pounding frantically. After a minute's rest I keep pedaling, slower now. I'm still about a mile away, but the cove is visible flashing off to my right. The sun is just teetering over the dark mass of trees on the horizon. I have 10-15 minutes tops until total darkness. Then another God nearly stops me, hitting me straight like a fist. He won't be there. I'll be too late and he'll leave. Or this will turn out to be a big joke, or a trick. I wrap one arm around my stomach, willing the ravioli to stay put and pick up speed again. I'm so busy circling one foot after the other, left, right, and doing a mental tug of war with my digestive tract, that I don't hear the regulators coming. I'm about to speed through the long-defunct traffic light at Baxter when I am suddenly dazzled by a wall of zipping, bouncing light, the beams of a dozen flashlights directed into my eyes, so I have to skid abruptly to a halt, lifting a hand to my face and nearly flipping over the handlebars, which would be a real disaster, since in my rush to get out of the house I forgot to bring my helmet. Stop, the voice of one of the regulators barks out, the leader in charge of the patrol, I guess. Identity check. Groups of regulators, both volunteer citizens and the actual regulators employed by the government, patrol the streets every night, looking for unkureds breaking curfew, checking the streets and, if the curtains are open, houses for unapproved activity, like 2 unkureds touching each other or walking together after dark, or even 2 kureds engaging in activity that might signal the re-emergence of the deliria after the procedure, like too much hugging and kissing. This rarely happens, but it does happen. Regulators report directly to the government and work closely with the scientists at the labs. Regulators were responsible for sending my mother off for her 3rd procedure. A passing patrol saw her crying over a photograph one night right after her 2nd failed treatment. She was looking at a picture of my father, and she'd forgotten to close the curtains all the way. Within days, she was back at the labs. Normally it's easy to avoid the regulators. You can practically hear them from a mile away. They carry walkie-talkies to coordinate with other patrolling groups, and the static interference of the radios going on and off makes it sound like a giant buzzing den of hornets is heading your way. I just wasn't paying attention. Mentally cursing myself for being so stupid, I fish my wallet out of my back pocket. At least I remember to grab that. It's illegal to go without ID in Portland. The last thing anybody wants is to spend the night in jail while the powers that be try to verify your validity. Magdalena Haloway, I say, trying to keep my voice steady, as I pass my ID to the regulator in charge. I can hardly make him out behind his flashlight, which he keeps trained on my face, forcing me to squint. He's big. That's all I know. Tall, thin, angular. Magdalena Haloway, he repeats. He flips my ID over between his long fingers and looks at my identity code, a number assigned to every citizen of the USA. The first 3 digits identify your state, the next 3 your city, the next 3 your family group, the next 4 your identity. And what are you doing, Magdalena? Curfew's in less than 40 minutes. Less than 40 minutes. That must mean it's almost 8:30. I shift on my feet, trying hard not to betray impatience. A lot of the regulators, especially the volunteer ones, are poorly paid city techs, window washers or gas meter readers or security guards. I take a deep breath and say as innocently as possible, I wanted to take a quick ride down to Back Cove. I do my best to smile and look kind of stupid. I was feeling bloaty after dinner. No point in lying any more than that. I'll just get myself in trouble. The lead regulator continues to examine me, the flashlight directed glaringly at my face, my ID card in his hand. For a second he seems to waver, and I'm sure he's going to let me go, but then he passes my ID to another regulator. Run it through with SVS, will you? Make sure it's valid. My heart plummets. SVS is the Secure Validation System, a computer network where all the valid citizenships for every single person in the entire country are stored. It can take 20 to 30 minutes for the computer system to match codes, depending on how many other people are calling into the system. He can't really think I forged an identity card, but he's going to waste my time while someone checks. And then, miraculously, a voice pipes up from the back of the group. She's valid, Jerry. I recognize her. She comes into the store. Lives at 172 Cumberland. Jerry swings around, lowering his flashlight in the process. I blink away the floating dots in my vision. I recognize a few faces vaguely, a woman who works in the local dry cleaners and spends her afternoons leaning in the doorway, chewing gum and occasionally spitting out into the street. The traffic officer who works downtown near Franklin Arterial, one of the few areas of Portland that has enough car traffic to justify one. One of the guys who collects our garbage, and there, in the back, Dev Howard, who owns the Quick Mart down the street from my house. Normally my uncle brings home most of our groceries, canned goods and pasta and sliced meats for the most part from his combo deli and convenience store, Stop and Save, all the way over on Munjoy Hill, but occasionally, if we're desperate for toilet paper or milk, I'll run out to the Quick Mart. Mr. Howard has always creeped me out. He's super skinny, and has hooded black eyes that remind me of a rat's. But tonight I feel like I could hug him. I didn't even think he knew my name. He's never said a word to me except, will that be all today? After he has rung up my purchases, glowering at me from underneath the heavy shade of his eyelids. I make a mental note to thank him the next time I see him. Jerry hesitates for a fraction of a second longer, but I can see that the other regulators are starting to get restless, shifting from foot to foot, eager to continue the patrol and find someone to bust. Jerry must sense it too, because he jerks his head abruptly in my direction. Let her have the ID. Relief makes me feel like laughing, and I have to struggle to look serious as I take my ID and tuck it into place. My hands are shaking ever so slightly. It's strange how being around the regulators will do that to you. Even when they're being relatively nice, you can't help but think of all the bad stories you've heard, the raids and the beatings and the ambushes. Just be careful, Magdalena, Jerry says as I straighten up. Make sure you're home before curfew. He tilts his flashlight into my eyes again. I lift my arm to my eyes, squinting against the dazzle. You wouldn't want to get into any trouble. He says it lightly, but for a moment I think I hear something hard running under his words, a current of anger or aggression. But then I tell myself I'm just being paranoid. No matter what the regulators do, they exist for our protection, for our own good. The regulators sweep away in a group around me, so for a few seconds I'm caught up in a tide of rough shoulders and cotton jackets, unfamiliar cologne and sweat smells. Walkie-talkies sputter to life and fade away again around me. I catch snippets of words and broadcasts, Market Street, a girl and a boy possibly infected, unapproved music on street. Lawrence, someone appears to be dancing. I get bumped side to side against arms and chests and elbows, until finally the group passes and I'm spit out again, left alone on the street as the regulators' footsteps grow more distant behind me. I wait until I can no longer hear the fuzz of their radio chatter or their boots hitting the pavement. Then I take off, feeling again a lifting sensation in my chest, that same sense of happiness and freedom. I can't believe how easy it was to get out of the house. I never knew I could lie to my aunt. I never knew I could lie, period. And when I think about how narrowly I escaped getting grilled by the regulators for hours, it makes me want to jump up and down and pump my fist in the air. Tonight the whole world is on my side. And I'm only a few minutes from Back Cove. My heart picks up its rhythm as I think about skidding down the sloping hill of grass, seeing Alex framed against the last, dazzling rays of sun, as I think about that single word breathed into my ear. Gray. I tear down Baxter, which loops around the last mile down to Back Cove. And then I stop short. The buildings have fallen away behind me, giving way to ramshackle sheds, sparsely situated on either side of the cracked and run-down road. Beyond that, a short strip of tall, weedy grass slants down toward the cove. The water is an enormous mirror, tipped with pink and gold from the sky. In that single blazing moment as I come around the bend, the sun curved over the dip of the horizon like a solid gold archway lets out its final winking rays of light, shattering the darkness of the water, turning everything white for a fraction of a second, and then falls away, sinking, dragging the pink and the red and the purple out of the sky with it, all the color bleeding away instantly and leaving only dark. Alex was right. It was gorgeous, one of the best I've ever seen. For a moment I can't move or do anything but stand there, breathing hard, staring. Then a numbness creeps over me. I'm too late. The regulators must have been wrong about the time. It must be after 8:30 now. Even if Alex decides to wait for me somewhere along the long loop of the cove, I don't have a prayer of finding him and making it home before curfew. My eyes sting and the world in front of me goes watery, colors and shapes sloshing together. For a second I think I must be crying, and I'm so startled I forget everything, forget about my disappointment and frustration, forget about Alex standing on the beach, the god of his hair catching the dying rays of sun, flashing copper. I can't remember the last time I cried. It's been years. I wipe my eyes with the back of my hand and my vision sharpens again. It's just sweat, I realize, relieved. I'm sweating, it's getting in my eyes. Still, the sick, leaden feeling won't work its way out of my stomach. I stay there for a few minutes, straddling my bike, squeezing the handlebars hard until I'm a little bit calmer. Part of me wants to say, screw it, to shove off, both legs extended, and go flying down the hill toward the water with the wind whipping up my hair. Screw curfew, screw the regulators, screw everyone. But I can't. I couldn't. I could never. I have no choice. I have to get home. I maneuver my bike around in a clumsy circle, and start back up the street. Now that the adrenaline and excitement have faded, my legs feel like they're made out of iron, and I'm panting before I've gone a quarter of a mile. This time I'm careful to stay alert for regulators and police and patrols. On the way home I tell myself that it's probably for the best. I must be crazy, zooming around in the half-dark just to meet up with some guy on the beach. Besides, everything has been explained. He works at the labs, probably just snuck in on evaluation day for some completely innocent reason to use the bathroom or refill his water bottle. And I remind myself that I probably imagined the whole thing, the message, the meeting up. He's probably sitting in his apartment somewhere, doing coursework for his classes. He's probably already forgotten about the two girls he met at the lab complex today. He was probably just being nice earlier, making casual conversation. It's for the best. But no matter how many times I repeat it, the strange hollow feeling in my stomach doesn't go away. And ridiculous as it is, I can't shake the persistent needling feeling that I've forgotten something, or missed something, or lost something forever. Chapter 7. Of all the systems of the body, neurological, cognitive, special, sensory, the cardiological system is the most sensitive and easily disturbed. The role of society must be to shelter these systems from infection and decay, or else the future of the human race is at stake. Like a summer fruit that is protected from insect invasion, bruising, and rot by the whole mechanism of modern farming, so must we protect the heart. The Role and Purpose of Society, the Book of SHHHP. 353. I was named after Mary Magdalene, who was nearly killed from love, so infected with deliria and in violation of the pacts of society she fell in love with men who would not have her or could not keep her. Book of Lamentations, Mary 13:1. We learned all about it in biblical science. First there was John, then Matthew, then Jeremiah, and Peter and Judas, and many other nameless men in between. Her last love, they say, was the greatest, a man named Joseph, a bachelor all his life, who found her on the street, bruised and broken and half crazy from deliria. There's some debate about what kind of man Joseph was, whether he was righteous or not, whether he ever succumbed to the disease, but in any case, he took good care of her. He nursed her to health and tried to bring her peace. By this time, however, it was too late. She was tormented by her past, haunted by the loves lost, and damaged and ruined by the evil she had inflicted on others and that others had inflicted on her. She could hardly eat. She wept all day. She clung to Joseph and begged him never to leave her, but couldn't find comfort in his goodness. And then one morning, she woke and Joseph was gone without a word or an explanation. This final abandonment broke her at last, and she fell to the ground, begging God to put her out of her misery. He heard her prayers, and in his infinite compassion he instead removed from her the curse of deliria, with which all humans had been burdened as punishment for the original sin of Eve and Adam. In a sense, Mary Magdalene was the very first cured. And so after years of tribulation and pain, she walked in righteousness and peace until the end of her days. Book of Lamentations, Mary 13:1. I always thought it was strange that my mother named me Magdalena. She didn't even believe in the cure. That was her whole problem. And the Book of Lamentations is all about the dangers of deliria. I've done a lot of thinking about it, and in the end I guess I figured out that despite everything, my mother knew that she was wrong, that the cure and the procedure were for the best. I think even then she knew what she was going to do, she knew what would happen. I guess my name was her final gift to me, in a way. It was a message. I think she was trying to say, forgive me. I think she was trying to say, someday, even this pain will be taken away. You see. No matter what everyone says, and despite everything, I know she wasn't all bad. The next 2 weeks are the busiest of my life. Summer explodes into Portland. In early June the heat was there, but not the color. The greens were still pale and tentative. The mornings had a biting coolness, but by the last week of school everything is technicolor and splash, outrageous blue skies and purple thunderstorms and ink black night skies and red flowers as bright as spots of blood. Every day after school there's an assembly, or ceremony, or graduation party to go to. Hannah gets invited to all of them. I get invited to most, which surprises me. Harlow Davis, who lives with Hannah in the West End, and whose father does something for the government, invites me to come over for a casual goodbye thing. I didn't even think she knew my name. Whenever she's talking to Hannah her eyes have always skated past me, like I'm not worth focusing on. I go anyway. I've always been curious about her house, and it turns out to be as spectacular as I imagined. Her family has a car too, and electric appliances everywhere that obviously get used every day, washers and dryers, and huge chandeliers filled with dozens and dozens of light bulbs. Harlow has invited most of the graduating class. There are 67 of us in total, and probably 50 at the party, which makes me feel less special, but it's still fun. We sit in the backyard while the housekeeper runs in and out of the house with plates and plates of food, coleslaw and potato salad and other barbecue stuff, and her father turns out spare ribs and hamburgers on the enormous smoking grill. I eat until I feel like I'm about to burst, and have to roll backward onto the blanket I'm sharing with Hannah. We stay there until almost curfew, when the stars are peeking through a curtain of dark blue and the mosquitoes rise up all at once, and we all go shrieking and laughing back into the house, slapping them away. Afterward I think it's one of the nicest days I've had in a long time. Even girls I don't really like Shelley Pearson, who has hated me since 6th grade, when I won the science fair, and she took 2nd place, start being nice. I guess it's because we all know the end is close. Most of us won't see one another after graduation, and even if we do, it will be different. We'll be different. We'll be adults, cured, tagged and labeled and paired and identified and placed neatly on our life path, perfectly round marble set to roll down even well-defined slopes. Teresa Grass turns 18 before school ends and gets cured. So does Morgan Dell. They're absent for a few days and come back to school just before graduation. The change is amazing. They seem peaceful now, mature and somehow remote, like they're encased in a thin layer of ice. Only 2 weeks ago Teresa's nickname was Teresa Gross, and everyone made fun of her for slouching and chewing on the ends of her hair and generally being a mess, but now she walks straight and tall with her eyes fixed straight in front of her, her lips barely curled in a smile, and everyone shifts a little in the hall so she can pass easily. Same thing goes for Morgan. It's like all their anxiety and self-consciousness has been removed along with the disease. Even Morgan's legs have stopped trembling. Whenever she used to have to speak in class, the trembling would get so bad it would rock the desk. But after the procedure, just like that, whoosh, the shaking stops. Of course they're not the first girls in our class to get cured. Eleanor Rana and Annie Hahn were both cured way back in the fall, and half a dozen other girls have had the procedure this past semester, but in them the difference is somehow more pronounced. I keep going with my countdown. 81 days, then 80, then 79. Willow Marks never comes back to school. Rumors filter back to us that she had her procedure, and it turned out fine. That she had her procedure, and now her brain is going haywire, and they're talking about committing her to the Crips, Portland's combo prison and mental ward. That she ran away to the wilds. Only one thing is for sure, the whole Marks family is under constant surveillance now. The regulators are blaming Mr. and Mrs. Marks and the whole extended family for not instilling in her a proper education, and only a few days after she was supposedly found in Deering Oaks Park, I overhear my aunt and uncle whispering that both of Willow's parents have been fired from their jobs. A week later we hear that they've had to move in with a distant relative. Apparently people kept throwing rocks at their windows, and a whole side of their house was written over with a single word: sympathizers. It makes no sense because Mr. and Mrs. Marks were on record insisting that their daughter have the procedure early, despite the risks, but as my aunt says, people get like that when they're scared. Everyone is terrified that the deliria will somehow find its way into Portland on a large scale. Everyone wants to prevent an epidemic. I feel bad for the Marks family, of course, but that's the way things are. It's like the regulators, you may not like the patrols and the identity checks, but since you know it's all done for your protection, it's impossible not to cooperate. And it may sound awful, but I don't think about Willow's family for long. There's just too much end of high school paperwork to file, and nervous energy, and lockers to clean out and final exams to take and people to say goodbye to. Hannah and I can barely find time to run together. When we do, we stick to our old roots by silent agreement. She never mentions the afternoon at the labs again to my surprise. But Hannah's mind has a tendency to skip around, and her new obsession is a collapse at the northern end of the border that people are saying might have been caused by invalids. I don't even consider going down to the labs again, not for one single solitary second. I focus on everything and anything besides my lingering questions about Alex, which isn't too hard, considering that I now can't believe I spent an evening biking up and down the streets of Portland lying to Carol and the regulators just to meet up with him. The very next day it felt like a dream or a delusion. I tell myself I must have gone temporarily insane, brain scramble from running in the heat. On graduation day, Hannah sits 3 rows ahead of me at the commencement ceremony. As she files past me to take her seat, she reaches out for my hand, 2 long pumps, 2 short ones, and when she sits down she tilts her head back so I can see that she has taken a marker and scrawled on the top of her graduation cap, "Thank God." I stifle a laugh, and she turns around and makes a pretend stern face at me. All of us are giddy, and I've never felt closer to the street. Anne's girls than that day, all of us sweating under the sun, which beams down on us like an exaggerated smile, fanning ourselves with the commencement brochures, trying not to yawn or roll our eyes while Principal McIntosh drones on about adulthood and our entrance into the community order, nudging one another and tugging on the collars of our scratchy graduation gowns to try to let some air down our necks. Family members sit in white plastic folding chairs under a cream white tarp fluttering with flags: the school flag, the city flag, the state flag, the American flag. They applaud politely as each graduate goes up to receive her diploma. When it's my turn, I scan the audience, looking for my aunt and my sister, but I'm so nervous about tripping and falling as I take my place on the stage and reach for the diploma in Principal McIntosh's hand. I can't see anything but color green, blue, white, a mess of pink and brown faces, or make out any individual sounds beyond the shush of clapping hands. Only Hannah's voice, loud and clear as a bell: "Hallelujah, hey Lena." That's our special pump you up chant that we used to do before track meets and tests, a combination of both of our names. Afterward we line up to take individual portraits with our diplomas. An official photographer has been hired, and a royal blue backdrop set up in the middle of the soccer field, where we all stand and pose. We're too excited to take the pictures seriously, though. People keep doubling over laughing in their pictures, so all you can see is the crown of their heads. When it's my turn for a picture at the very last second, Hannah jumps in and throws one arm around my shoulders, and the photographer is so startled he presses down on the shutter anyway. Click. There we are. I'm turning to Hannah, mouth open, surprised, about to laugh. She's a full head taller than me, has her eyes shut and her mouth open. I really do think there was something special about that day, something golden and maybe even magic, because even though my face was all red and my hair looked sticky on my forehead, it's like Hannah rubbed off on me a little bit, because despite everything, and just in that one picture, I look pretty. More than pretty. Beautiful, even. The school band keeps playing, mostly in tune, and the music floats across the field, and is echoed by the birds wheeling in the sky. It's like something lifts in that moment, some huge pressure or divide, and before I know what's happening, all my classmates are crushing together in a huge hug, jumping up and down and screaming, "We did it! We did it! We did it!" And none of the parents or teachers try to separate us. As we start to break away, I see them encircling us, watching with patient expressions, hands folded. I catch my aunt's gaze and my stomach does a weird twist, and I know that she, like everyone else, is giving us this moment, our last moment together, before things change for good and forever. And things will change, or changing, even at that second. As the group dissolves into clumps of students, and the clumps dissolve into individuals, I notice Teresa Grass and Morgan Dell already starting across the lawn toward the street. They are each walking with their families, heads down, without once looking back. They haven't been celebrating with us, I realize, and it occurs to me I haven't seen Eleanor, Rana, or Annie Hahn, or the other Kurds either. They must have already gone home. A curious ache throbs in the back of my throat. Even though of course this is how things are, everything ends, people move on, they don't look back. It's how they should be. I catch sight of Rachel through the crowd and go running up to her, suddenly eager to be next to her, wishing she would reach down and ruffle my hair like she used to when I was very little and say, "Good job, Looney," her old nickname for me. Rachel. I'm breathless for no reason, and I have trouble squeezing the words out. I'm so happy to see her I feel like I could burst into tears. I don't though, obviously. You came. Of course I came. She smiles at me. You're my only sister, remember. She passes me a bouquet of daisies she has brought with her, loosely wrapped in brown paper. Congratulations, Lena. I stick my face in the flowers and inhale, trying to fight down the urge to reach out and hug her. For a second we just stand there, blinking at each other, and then she reaches out to me. I'm sure she's going to put her arms around me for old time's sake, or at the very least give me a one-arm squeeze. Instead she just flicks a bang off my forehead. Gross, she says, still smiling. You're all sweaty. It's stupid and immature to feel disappointed, but I do. It's the gown, I say, and realize that yes, that must be the problem. The gown is what's choking me, stifling me, making it hard to breathe. Come on, she says. Aunt Carol will want to congratulate you. Aunt Carol is standing at the field's periphery with my Uncle Grace and Jenny talking to Mrs. Springer, my history teacher. I fall into step beside Rachel. She is only a few inches taller than I am, and we walk together in sync, but separated by 3 feet of space. She is quiet. I can tell she's already wondering when she can go home and get on with her life. I let myself look back once. I can't help it. I watch the girls circulating in their orange gowns like flames. Everything seems to zoom back, recede away at once. All the voices intermingle and become indistinguishable from one another, like the constant white noise of the ocean running underneath the rhythm of the Portland streets, so constant you hardly notice it. Everything looks stark and vivid and frozen, as though drawn precisely and outlined in ink. Parent smiles frozen, camera flashes blinding, mouths open and white teeth glistening, dark glossy hair and deep blue sky and unrelenting light, everyone drowning in light, everything so clear and perfect I'm sure it must already be a memory, or a dream. Chapter 8. H is for hydrogen, a weight of 1. When fissions split as brightly lit. As hot as any sun. He is for helium, a weight of 2. The noble gas, the ghostly pass. That lifts the world anew. Li is for ligium, a weight of 3. A funeral pyre when touched with fire. And deadly sleep for me. B is for beryllium, a weight of 4. From the elemental prayers, prayer and study, the book of SHHH. During the summers I have to help my uncle at the stop and save on Mondays, Wednesdays and Saturdays, mostly stocking shelves and working behind the deli counter and occasionally helping with filing and accounting in the little office behind the cereal and dry goods aisle. Thankfully, in late June Andrew Marcus gets cured and reassigned to a permanent position at another grocery store. On the 4th of July I head to Hannah's house in the morning. Every year we go to see the fireworks at the Eastern Promenade. A band is always playing and vendors set up their carts selling fried meat on skewers and corn on the cob and apple pie floating in a puddle of ice cream served in little paper boats. The 4th of July, the day of our independence, the day we commemorate the closing of our nation's border forever, is one of my favorite holidays. I love the music that pipes through the streets, love the way the steam rising thick from the grills makes the streets look cloudy, the people shadowy and unclear. I especially love the temporary extension of curfew. Instead of being home at 9 o'clock, all uncureds are allowed to stay out until 11. In recent years Hannah and I have made it a kind of game to stay out until the last possible second, cutting it closer and closer every year. Last year I stepped into the house at 10:58 exactly, heart hammering in my chest, shaking with exhaustion. I'd had to sprint home. But as I lay in bed I couldn't stop grinning. I felt like I'd gotten away with something. I type in Hannah's 4-digit gate code. She gave it to me in 8th grade, saying it was a sign of trust and also that she'd slip me from the top of the head to the heels if I shared it with anyone else and slip in through the front door. I never bother knocking. Her parents are hardly ever home, and Hannah never answers the door. I'm pretty much the only person who comes over to see her. It's weird. Hannah was always really popular in school. People looked up to her and wanted to be like her, but even though she was really friendly with everybody, she never really got close with anyone besides me. Sometimes I wonder whether she wishes she'd been assigned a different desk partner in Mrs. Jablonski's 2nd grade class, which is how we first became friends. Hannah's last name is Tate, and we were linked up by alphabetical order. By then I was already going by my aunt's last name Tittle. I wonder whether she wishes she'd been placed with Rebecca Trelawney, or Katie Scarp, or even Melissa Portofino. Sometimes I feel like she deserves a best friend, who is just a little more special. Once Hannah told me that she likes me because I'm for real, because I really feel things. But that's the whole problem, how much I feel things. Hello. I call out, as soon as I'm inside Hannah's house. The front hall is dark and cool as always. Goosebumps prick up over my arms. No matter how many times I come to Hannah's house, I'm always shocked by the power of the air conditioning, which hums somewhere deep inside the walls. For a moment I just stand there, inhaling the clean smells of furniture, polish and Windex and fresh cut flowers. Music is pulsing from Hannah's room upstairs. I try to identify the song but can't make out any words, just bass throbbing through the floorboards. At the top of the stairs I pause. Hannah's bedroom door is closed. I definitely don't recognize the song she's playing or blasting, really so loud I have to remind myself that Hannah's house is shielded on 4 sides by trees and lawn, and no one will sick the regulators on her. It's not like any music I've ever heard. It's a shrieky, shrill, fierce kind of music. I can't even tell whether the singer is male or female. Little fingers of electricity creep up my spine, a feeling I used to have when I was a tiny child when I would creep into the kitchen and try to sneak an extra cookie from the pantry, the feeling right before the creak and squeak of my mom's footsteps in the kitchen behind me when I would whirl around, my hands and face coated in crumbs, guilty. I shake off the feeling and push open Hannah's door. She's sitting at her computer, feet propped up on her desk, bobbing her head and tapping out a rhythm on her thighs. As soon as she sees me, she swings forward and hits a key on her keyboard. The music cuts off instantly. Strangely, the silence that follows seems just as loud. She flips her hair over one shoulder and scoots away from the desk. Something flickers over her face, an expression that passes too quickly for me to identify it. "Hi," she chirps, a little too cheerfully. "Didn't hear you come in. I doubt you would have heard me break in." I go over to her bed and collapse on top of it. Hannah has a queen-size bed with 3 down pillows. It's like heaven. What was that? What was what? She lifts her knees to her chest and swivels a full circle in her chair. I sit up on my elbows and watch her. Hannah only acts this dumb when she's hiding something. The music. She still stares at me blankly. The song you were blasting when I came in. The one that almost burst my eardrums. Oh, that. Hannah blows her bangs out of her face. This is another one of her tells. Whenever she's bluffing in poker, she won't stop fussing with her bangs. Just some new band I found online. On Lamb. I press. Hannah's music obsessed and used to spend hours surfing Lamb, the library of authorized music and movies when we were in middle school. Hannah looks away. Not exactly. What do you mean, not exactly? The intranet, like everything else in the United States, is controlled and monitored for our protection. All the websites, all the content, is written by government agencies, including the list of authorized entertainment, which gets updated biannually. Digital books go into the lab, the library of approved books, movies and music go into Lamb, and for a small fee you can download them to your computer. If you have one, that is. I don't. Hannah sighs, keeping her eyes averted. Finally she looks at me. Can you keep a secret? Now I sit up all the way, scooting to the edge of the bed. I don't like the way she's looking at me. I don't trust it. What is this about, Hannah? Can you keep a secret? She repeats. I think of standing with her in front of the labs on evaluation day, the sun beating down on us, the way she forced her mouth close to my ear to whisper about happiness and unhappiness. I'm suddenly afraid for her, of her. But I nod and say, yeah, of course. Okay. She looks down, fiddles with the hem of her shorts for a second, takes a deep breath. So last week I met this guy. What? I nearly fall off the bed. Relax. She holds up a hand. He's cured, okay? He works for the city. He's a censor, actually. My heartbeat slows and I settle back against her pillows again. Okay. So, Hannah says, drawing the word out, he was waiting at the doctor's with me. When I went to have my PT, you know. Hannah sprained her ankle in the fall and still has to do physical therapy once a week to keep it strong. And we started talking. She pauses. I don't really see where the story is going or how it relates to the music she was playing, so I just wait for her to go on. Finally she does. Anyway, I was telling him about boards and how I really want to go to use them, and he was telling me about his job, what he does, you know, day to day. He codes the online access restrictions so people can't just write whatever or post things themselves or write up false information or inflammatory opinion. She puts this in quotes, rolling her eyes, and other stuff like that. He's like an intranet security guard. Okay, I say again. I want to tell Hannah to get to the point. I know all about online security restrictions, everybody does, but that would just make her clam up. She sucks in a deep breath. But he doesn't just code the security. He checks for lapses like break-ins. Hackers, basically, who jump through all the security hoops and manage to post their own stuff. The government calls them floaters, websites that might be up for an hour, or a day or 2 days before they're discovered, websites full of unauthorized stuff, opinions and message boards and video clips and music. And you found one. A sick feeling has settled in my stomach. Words keep flashing in my brain, like a neon sign going in and out, illegal interrogation, surveillance. Hannah. She doesn't seem to notice that I've gone totally still. Her face is suddenly animated, as alive and energetic as I've ever seen it, and she leans forward on her knees, talking in a rush. Not just one. Dozens. There are tons of them out there, if you know how to look. If you know where to look. It's incredible, Lena. All these people, they must be all over the country, sneaking in through the loops and the holes. You should see some of the things people write. About the cure. It's not just the invalids who don't believe in it. There are people here, all over the place, who don't think. I'm staring at her so hard she drops her eyes and switches topics. And you should hear the music. Incredible, amazing music, like nothing you've ever heard, music that almost takes your head off, That makes you want to scream and jump up and down and break stuff and cry. Hannah's room is big, almost twice as big as my room at home, but I feel as though the walls are pressing down around me. If the air conditioning's still working, I can no longer feel it. The air feels hot and heavy, like a wet breath, and I stand up and move to the window. Hannah breaks off, finally. I try to shove open her window, but it won't budge. I push and strain against the windowsill. Lena, Hannah says timidly, after a minute. It won't open. All I can think is, I need air. The rest of my thoughts are a blur of radio static and fluorescent lights and lab coats and steel tables and surgical knives, an image of Willow Marks getting dragged off to the labs, screaming, her house defaced with marker and paint. Lena, Hannah says, louder now. Come on. It's stuck. Wood must be warped from the heat. If it would just open. I heave and the window flies upward, finally. There's a popping sound, and the latch that's been keeping it in place snaps off and skitters to the middle of the floor. For a second Hannah and I both stand there, staring at it. The air coming in the open window doesn't make me feel better. It's even hotter outside. Sorry, I mumble. I can't look at her. I didn't mean to, I didn't know it was locked. The windows at my house don't lock. Don't worry about the window. I don't care about the stupid window. One time Grace got out of her crib when she was little, almost made it onto the roof. Just slid the window right open and started climbing. Lena. Hannah reaches out and grabs my shoulders. I don't know if I have a fever or what, going hot and cold every 5 seconds, but her touch makes a chill go through me and I pull away quickly. You're mad at me. I'm not mad. I'm worried about you. But that's only half true. I am mad, furious, in fact. All this time I've been blindly coasting along the idiot sidekick, thinking about our last real summer together, stressing about the matches I'll get and evaluations and boards and normal stuff, and she's been nodding and smiling and saying yeah, me too, and I'm sure things will be fine, and meanwhile behind my back, she's been turning into someone I don't know, someone with secrets and weird habits and opinions about things we're not even supposed to think about. Now I know why I was so startled on evaluation day when she turned back to whisper to me, eyes huge and glowing. It was like she had dropped away for a second, my best friend, my only real friend, and in her place was a stranger. That's what's been happening all this time. Hannah has been morphing into a stranger. I turn back to the window. A sharp blade of sadness goes through me, deep and quick. I guess it was bound to happen eventually. I've always known it would. Everyone you trust, everyone you think you can count on, will eventually disappoint you. When left to their own devices, people lie and keep secrets and change and disappear, some behind a different face or personality, some behind a dense early morning fog, beyond a cliff. That's why the cure is so important. That's why we need it. Listen, I'm not going to get arrested just for looking at some websites. Or listening to music, or whatever. You could. People have been arrested for less. She knows this too. She knows and doesn't care. Yeah, well, I'm sick of it. Hannah's voice trembles a little, which throws me. I've never heard her sound less than certain. We shouldn't even be talking about this. Someone could be. Someone could be listening. She cuts me off, finishes my sentence for me. God, Lena. I'm sick of that too. Aren't you? Sick of always checking your back, looking behind you, watching what you say, think, do. I can't breathe, I can't sleep, I can't move. I feel like there are walls everywhere. Everywhere I go, bam. There's a wall. Everything I want, bam. Another wall. She rakes a hand through her hair. For once, she doesn't look pretty and in control. She looks pale and unhappy, and her expression reminds me of something, but I can't place it right away. It's for our own protection, I say, wishing I sounded more confident. I've never been good in a fight. Everything will get better once we're. Again, she jumps in. Once we're cured. She laughs, a short barking sound with no humor in it, but at least she doesn't contradict me directly. Right. That's what everybody says. All of a sudden it hits me, she reminds me of the animals we saw once on a class trip to the slaughterhouse. All the cows were lined up, packed in their stalls, staring at us mutely as we walked by, with that same look in their eyes, fear and resignation and something else. Desperation. I'm really scared, then truly terrified for her. But when she speaks again, she sounds a little bit calmer. Maybe it will get better, I mean, once we're cured. But until then. This is our last chance, Lena. Our last chance to do anything. Our last chance to choose. There's the word from evaluation day again, choose, but I nod because I don't want to set her off again. So what are you going to do? She looks away, biting her lip, and I can tell she's debating whether or not to trust me. There's this party tonight. What? Zoom. The fear floods back in. She rushes on. It's something I found on one of the floaters. It's a music thing, a few bands playing out by the border in Stroudwater on one of the farms. You can't be serious. You're not actually going, right? You're not even thinking about it. It's safe, okay? I promise. These websites. It's really amazing, Lena, I swear you'd be into it if you look. They're hidden. Links usually, embedded on normal pages, approved government stuff, but I don't know, somehow you can tell they don't feel right, you know. They don't belong. I grasp at a single word. Safe. How can it be safe? That guy you met, the censor, his whole job is to track down people who are stupid enough to post these things. They're not stupid, they're incredibly smart actually. Not to mention the regulators and patrols and the youth guard and curfew and segregation and just about everything else that makes this one of the worst ideas. Fine. Hannah raises her arms and brings them slapping down against her thighs. The noise is so loud it makes me jump. Fine. So it's a bad idea. So it's risky. You know what? I don't care. For a second there's silence. We're glaring at each other, and the air between us feels charged and dangerous, a thin electrical coil ready to explode. What about me? I say finally, struggling to keep my voice from shaking. You're welcome to come. 10:30 Roaring Brook Farms, Stroudwater. Music. Dancing. You know, fun. The stuff we're supposed to be having, before they cut out half of our brain. I ignore the last part of her comment. I don't think so, Hannah. In case you've forgotten, we have other plans for tonight. Have had plans for tonight for, the past 15 years. Yeah, well, things change. She turns her back to me, but I feel like she's reached out and punched me in the stomach. Fine. My throat is squeezing up. This time I know it's the real deal, and I'm on the verge of crying. I go over to her bed and start gathering up my stuff. Of course my bag has spilled over on its side, and now her comforter is covered with little scraps of paper and gum wrappers and coins and pens. I start stuffing these back into my bag, fighting back the tears. Go ahead. Do whatever you want tonight. I don't care. Maybe Hannah feels bad, because her voice softens a little bit. Seriously, Lena. You should think about coming. We won't get in any trouble, I promise. You can't promise that. I take a deep breath, wishing my voice would stop quivering. You don't know that. You can't be positive. And you can't go on being so scared all the time. That's it, that does it. I whirl around furious, something deep and black and old rising inside of me. Of course I'm scared. And I'm right to be scared. And if you're not scared, it's just because you have the perfect little life, and the perfect little family, and for you everything is perfect, perfect, perfect. You don't see. You don't know. Perfect. That's what you think. You think my life is perfect. Her voice is quiet but full of anger. I'm tempted to move away from her but force myself to stay put. Yeah. I do. Again she lets out a barking laugh, a quick explosion. So you think this is it, huh? As good as it gets. She turns a full circle, arms extended, like she's embracing the room, the house, everything. Her question startles me. What else is there? Everything, Lena. She shakes her head. Listen, I'm not going to apologize. I know you have your reasons for being scared. What happened to your mom was terrible. Don't bring my mom into this. My body goes tight, electric. But you can't go on blaming her for everything. She died more than 10 years ago. Anger swallows me, a thick fog. My mind careens wildly like wheels over ice, bumping up against random words, fear. Blame. Don't forget. Mom. I love you. And now I see that Hannah is a snake, has been waiting a long time to say this to me, has been waiting to squirm her way in as deep and painful as she can go, and bite. Fuck you. In the end, these are the two words that come. She holds up both hands. Listen, Lena, I'm just saying you have to let it go. You're nothing like her. And you're not going to end up like her. You don't have it in you. Fuck you. She's trying to be nice, but my mind is closed up and the words come out on their own, cascading over one another. And I wish every single one was a punch so that I could hit her in the face, bam 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 bam. You don't know a single thing about her. And you don't know me. You don't know anything. Lena. She reaches for me. Don't touch me. I'm stumbling backward, grabbing my bag, bumping against her desk as I move toward the door. My vision is cloudy. I can barely make out the banisters. I'm tripping, half falling down the stairs, finding the front door by touch. I think Hannah might be calling to me, but everything is lost to a roaring, rushing in my ears inside my head. Sunshine, brilliant, brilliant white light, cool biting iron under my fingers, the gate, ocean smells, gasoline. Wailing growing louder. A punctuated shriek, beep, beep, beep. My head clears all at once and I jump out of the middle of the street just before I'm squashed by a police car which barrels past me, horn still blaring, siren whirling, leaving me coughing up dirt and dust. The ache in my throat gets so bad it feels like I'm gagging, and when I finally let the tears come it's a huge relief, like dropping something heavy after you've been carrying it for a long time. Once I start crying I can't stop, and all the way home I have to keep mashing my palm into my eyes every few seconds, smearing away the tears just so I can see where I'm going. I comfort myself by thinking that in less than 2 months this will seem like nothing to me. All of it will fall away and I'll rise up new and free, like a bird winging up into the air. That's what Hannah doesn't understand, has never understood. For some of us, it's about more than the deliria. Some of us, the lucky ones, will get the chance to be reborn, newer, fresher, better. Healed and whole and perfect again, like a misshapen slab of iron that comes out of the fire glowing, glittering, razor sharp. That is all I want, all I have ever wanted. That is the promise of the cure. Chapter 9. Lord, keep our hearts fixed. As you fix the planets in their orbits. And cooled the chaos of emerging. As the gravity of your will keeps star and star from collapsing. Keeps ocean from turning to dust and dust from turning to water. Keeps planets from colliding. And suns from exploding. So, Lord, keep our hearts fixed. In steady orbit. And help them stay the path. Psalm 21. From Prayer and Study, the Book of SHHH. That night, even after I'm in bed, Hannah's words replay themselves endlessly in my head. You won't end up like her. You don't have it in you. She only said it to comfort me. I know it should be reassuring, but for some reason it isn't. For some reason it makes me upset. There's a deep aching in my chest, as though something large and cold and sharp is lodged there. Here's another thing Hannah doesn't understand. Thinking about the disease and worrying about it, and stressing about whether I've inherited some predisposition for it, that's all I have of my mom. The disease is what I know about her. It is the link. Otherwise, I have nothing. It's not that I don't have memories of her. I do, lots of them, considering how young I was when she died. I remember that, when there was fresh snow, she would send me outside to pack pans with handfuls of it. Once inside, we would drizzle maple syrup into the snow-filled pans, watching it harden into amber candy almost instantly, all loops and fragile, sugared filigree, like edible lace. I remember how much she loved to sing to us as she bounced me in the water at the beach off Eastern Prom. I didn't know how strange this was at the time. Other mothers teach their children to swim. Other mothers bounce their babies in the water, and apply sunscreen to make sure their babies don't burn, and do all the things that a mother is supposed to do, as outlined in the parenting section of the Book of SHHH. But they don't sing. I remember that she brought me trays of buttered toast when I was sick and kissed my bruises when I fell, and I remember once when she lifted me to my feet after I fell off my bike and began to rock me in her arms, a woman gasped and said to her, "You should be ashamed of yourself," and I didn't understand why, which made me cry harder. After that she comforted me only in private. In public she would just frown and say, "You're okay, Lena. Get up." We used to have dance parties too. My mother called them sock jams because we would roll up the carpets in the living room and put on our thickest socks, and slip and slide along the wooden hallways. Even Rachel joined in, though she always claimed to be too old for baby games. My mom would draw the curtains and wedge pillows under the front and back doors and turn up the music. We laughed so hard I always went to bed with a stomachache. Eventually, I understood that on our sock jam nights she'd closed the curtains to prevent us from being seen by passing patrols, that she'd stopped up the doors with pillows so that the neighbors would not report us for playing music and laughing too much, both potential warning signs of the deliria. I understood that she used to tuck my father's military pin, a silver dagger he had inherited from his own father, which she wore every day on a chain around her neck beneath the collar of her shirt whenever we left the house, so no one would see it and become suspicious. I understood that all the happiest moments of my childhood were a lie. They were wrong and unsafe and illegal. They were freakish. My mother was freakish, and I'd probably inherited the freakishness from her. For the first time, really, I wonder what she must have been feeling, thinking, the night she walked out to the cliffs and kept walking, feet pedaling the air. I wonder whether she was scared. I wonder whether she thought of me or Rachel. I wonder whether she was sorry for leaving us behind. I start thinking about my father too. I don't remember him at all, though I have some dim, ancient impression of two warm, rough hands and a large looming face floating above mine, but I think that's just because my mother kept a framed portrait in her bedroom of my father and me. I was only a few months old, and he was holding me, smiling, looking at the camera. But there's no way I'm remembering for real. I wasn't even a year old when he died. Cancer. The heat is horrible, thick, clotting on the walls. Jenny is rolled over on her back, arms and legs flung open on top of her comforter, breathing silently with her mouth gaping open. Even Grace is fast asleep, murmuring soundlessly into her pillow. The whole room smells like a wet exhalation, skin and tongues and warm milk. I ease out of bed already dressed in black jeans and a t-shirt. I didn't even bother to change into my pajamas. I knew I would never be able to sleep tonight. And earlier in the evening, I'd come to a decision. I was sitting at the dinner table with Carol and Uncle William and Jenny and Grace, while everyone chewed and swallowed in silence, staring blankly at one another, feeling as though the air was weighing down on me, constricting my breath, like two fists squeezing tighter and tighter around a water balloon, when I realized something. Hannah said I didn't have it in me, but she was wrong. My heart is beating so loudly I can hear it, and I'm positive that everyone else will too, that it will make my aunt sit bolt upright in her bed, ready to catch me and accuse me of trying to sneak out. Which is, of course, exactly what I am trying to do. I didn't even know a heart could beat so loudly, and it reminds me of an Edgar Allan Poe story we had to read in one of our social studies classes about this guy who kills this other guy and then gives himself up to the police because he's convinced he can hear the dead guy's heart beating up from beneath his floorboards. It's supposed to be a story about guilt and the dangers of civil disobedience, but when I first read it I got it seemed kind of lame and melodramatic. Now I get it though. Poe must have snuck out a lot when he was young. I ease open the bedroom door, holding my breath, praying it doesn't squeak. At one point Jenny lets out a shout, and my heart freezes. But then she rolls over, flinging one arm across her pillow, and I exhale slowly, realizing she's just fussing in her sleep. The hall is totally dark. The room my aunt and uncle share is dark too, and the only sound comes from the whispering of the trees outside and the low ticks and groans from the walls, the usual old house arithmetic noises. I finally work up the courage to slip out into the hall and slide the bedroom door shut behind me. I go so slowly that it almost feels like I'm not moving at all, feeling my way by the bumps and ripples in the wallpaper over to the stairs, then sliding my hand inch by inch over the banister, walking on my very tiptoes. Even so, it seems like the house is fighting me, like it's just screaming for me to be caught. Every step seems to creak, or shriek, or moan. Every single floorboard quivers and shudders under my feet, and I start mentally bargaining with the house. If I make it to the front door without waking up Aunt Carol, I swear to God I'll never slam another door. I'll never call you an old piece of turd again, not even in my head, and I'll never curse the basement when it floods, and I will never, ever, ever kick the bedroom wall when I'm annoyed at Jenny. Maybe the house hears me, because, miraculously, I do make it to the front door. I pause for a second longer, listening for the sounds of footsteps upstairs, whispered voices, anything but other than my heart, which is still going strong and loud. It's silent. Even the house seems to hesitate and take a breath, because the front door swings open with barely a whisper, and in the last second before I slip out into the night the rooms behind me are as dark and still as a grave. Outside, I hesitate on the front stoop. The fireworks stopped an hour ago. I heard the last stuttering explosions, like distant gunfire, just as I was getting ready for bed, and now the streets are strangely silent and totally empty. It's a little after 11 o'clock. Some kurds must be lingering at the Eastern Prom. Everyone else is home by now. Not a single light is burning on the street. All the street lamps were disabled years ago, except in the richest parts of Portland, and they look to me like blinded eyes. Thank God the moon is so bright. I strain to detect the sounds of passing patrols or groups of regulators. I almost hope I do, because then I'll have to go back inside to my bed to safety, and already the panic is starting to drill through me again. But everything is perfectly still and quiet, almost like it's frozen. Everything rational, right, and good is screaming for me to turn around and go upstairs, but some stubborn inner center keeps me moving forward. I go down the walk and unchain my bike from the gate. My bike rattles a little bit, particularly when you first start pedaling, so I walk it a ways down the street. The wheels tick reassuringly over the pavement. I've never been out this late on my own in my life. I've never broken curfew. But alongside the fear, which is always there, of course, that constant crushing weight, is a small flickering feeling of excitement that works its way up and underneath the fear, pushing it back some. Like, it's okay, I'm alright, I can do this. I'm just a girl and in between girl 5'2", nothing special, but I can do this, and all the curfews and the patrols in the world aren't stopping me. It's amazing how much comfort this God gives me. It's amazing how it breaks up the fear, like a tiny candle lit in the middle of the night, lighting up the shapes of things, burning away the dark. When I reach the end of my street, I hop up on my bike, feeling the gears shudder into place. The breeze feels good as I start pedaling, careful not to go too quickly, staying alert in case there are regulators nearby. Fortunately, Stroudwater and Roaring Brook Farms are in the exact opposite direction from the 4th of July celebrations at Eastern Prom. Once I get to the broad swath of farmland that surrounds Portland like a belt, I should be okay. The farms and slaughterhouses rarely get patrolled. But first I have to make it through the West End, where rich people like Hannah live, through Libby Town, and over the Fore River at the Congress Street Bridge. Thankfully, each street I turn down is empty. Stroudwater is a good 30 minutes away, even if I'm biking quickly. As I get off peninsula, moving away from the buildings and businesses of downtown Portland and onto the more suburban mainland, the houses get smaller and farther apart, set back on weedy patchy yards. This isn't rural Portland yet, but there are signs of the countryside creeping in, plants poking up through half-rotted porches, an owl hooting mournfully in the dark, a black side of bats cutting suddenly across the sky. Almost all these houses have cars in front of them, just like the richer houses in West End, but these have obviously been salvaged from the junkyards. They're mounted on cinder blocks and covered in rust. I pass one that has a tree growing straight through its sunroof, like the car has just dropped out of the sky and been impaled there, and another one hood open, missing its engine. As I go past, a cat startles up out of its black cavity, meowing, blinking at me. After I cross the Fore River, the houses fall away altogether, and it's just field after field and farm after farm, with names like Meadow Lane and Sheep's Bay and Willow Creek, which make them sound all homey and nice, places where someone might be baking muffins and skimming fresh cream for butter. But most of the farms are owned by big corporations, packed with livestock, and often staffed by orphans. I've always liked it out here, but it's kind of freaky in the dark, open and totally empty, and I can't help but think that if I did come across a patrol, there would be no place to hide, no alley to turn down. Across the fields I see the low, dark silhouettes of barns and silos, some of them brand new, some of them barely standing, clinging to the earth like teeth digging into something. The air smells slightly sweet, like growing things and manure. Roaring Brook Farms is right next to the southwestern border. It's been abandoned for years, since half the main building and both grain silos were destroyed in a fire. About 5 minutes before I get there, I think I can make out a rhythm drumming almost imperceptibly under the throaty song of the crickets, but for a while I'm not sure if I'm just imagining it or only hearing my heart, which has started pounding again. Farther on though, and I'm sure. Even before I reach the little dirt road that leads down to the barn, or at least, the portion of the barn that's still standing, strains of music spring up, crystallizing in the night air like rain turning suddenly to snow, drifting to earth. Now I'm scared again. All I can think is wrong, 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 a word that drums in my head. Aunt Carol would kill me if she knew what I was doing. Kill me, or have me thrown into the crypts or taken to the labs for an early procedure, Willowmark style. I hop off my bike when I see the turnoff to Roaring Brook, and the big metal sign staked in the ground that reads "Property of Portland, no trespassing." I wheel my bike a little ways into the woods at the side of the road. The actual farmhouse and the old barn are still 500 or 600 feet down the road, but I don't want to bring my bike any farther. I don't lock it up though. I don't even want to think about what would happen if there was a raid, but if there is, I'm not going to want to be fumbling with a lock in the half-dark. I'll need speed. I step around the no trespassing sign. I'm getting to be quite the expert at ignoring them, I realize, remembering how Hannah and I hopped the gate at the labs. It's the first time I've thought about that afternoon in a while, and right then a vision of Alex rises up in front of me, a memory of seeing him on the observation deck, head tilted back and laughing. I have to focus on the land around me, the brightness of the moon, the wildflowers on the road. It helps me beat back the feeling that I'm going to be sick at any second. I don't really know what compelled me out of the house, why I felt like I had to prove Hannah wrong about something, and I'm trying to ignore the idea, way more disturbing than anything else, that my argument with Hannah was just an excuse. That maybe, deep down, I was just curious. I'm not feeling curious now. I'm feeling scared. And very, very stupid. The farmhouse and the old barn are positioned in a dip of land between two hills, a mini valley, like the buildings are sitting right in the middle of somebody's pursed lips. Because of the way the land slopes, I can't see the farmhouse yet, but as I get closer to the top of the hill, the music gets clearer, louder. It's like nothing I've ever heard before. It's definitely not like the authorized music you can download off LAM, prim and harmonious and structured, the kind of music that gets played in the band shell in Deering Oaks Park during official summer concerts. Someone is singing, a beautiful voice as thick and heavy as warm honey, spilling up and down the scale so quickly, I feel dizzy just listening. The music that's playing underneath the voice is strange and clashing and wild, but nothing like the wailing and scratching that I heard Hannah playing on her computer earlier today, though I recognize certain similarities, certain patterns of melody and rhythm. That music was metallic and awful, fuzzy through the speakers. This music ebbs and flows, irregular, sad. It reminds me weirdly of watching the ocean during a bad storm, the lashing, crashing waves and the spray of sea foam against the docks. The way it takes your breath away, the power and the hugeness of it. That's exactly what happens as I listen to the music as I come up over the final crest of hill and the half-ruined barn and collapsing farmhouse fan out in front of me. Just as the music swells, a wave about to break, the breath leaves my body all at once and I'm struck dumb by the beauty of it. For a second it seems to me like I really am looking down at the ocean, a sea of people writhing and dancing and the light spilling down from the barn like shadows twisting up around the flame. The barn is completely gutted, split open and blackened by the fire, exposed to the elements. Only half of it is left standing, fragments of 3 walls, a portion of the roof, part of an elevated platform that must once have been used to store hay. That's where the band is playing. Thin, stocky trees have begun pushing up in the fields. Older trees seared completely white from the fire and totally bald of branches and leaves, point like ghostly fingers to the sky. 50 feet beyond the barn, I see the low fringe of blackness where the unregulated land begins. The wilds. I can't make out the border fence from this distance, but I imagine I can feel it, can sense the electricity buzzing through the air. I've only been close to the border fence a few times. Once with my mother years ago, when she made me listen to the zipping of the electricity, a current so strong the air seems to hum with it. You can get a shock just from standing 4 feet away and promise never, ever, ever to touch it. She told me that when the cure was first made mandatory, some people tried to escape over the border. They never put more than a hand on the fence before being fried like bacon. I remember that's exactly what she said, like bacon. Since then I've run alongside it with Hannah a few times, always careful to stay a good 10 feet away. In the barn someone has set up speakers and amps and even 2 enormous, industrial-size lamps, which make everyone close to the stage look starkly white and hyper-real, and everyone else dark and indistinct, blurry. A song ends and the crowd roars together in ocean sound. I think they must be mooching power from a grid on one of the other farms. I think this is stupid. I'll never find Hannah. There are too many people, and then a new song starts, this one just as wild and beautiful, and it's like the music reaches across all that black space and pulls at something at the very heart and root of me, plucking me like a string. I head down the hill toward the barn. The weird thing is I don't choose to do it. My feet just go on their own as though they've happened on some invisible track, and it's all just slide, slide, slide. For a moment I forget that I'm supposed to be looking for Hannah. I feel as though I'm in a dream where strange things are happening but they don't feel strange. Everything is cloudy, everything is wrapped in a fog, and I'm filled from head to toe with the single burning desire to get closer to the music, to hear the music better, for the music to go on and on and on. Lena. Oh my God, Lena. Hearing my name snaps me out of my daze, and I'm suddenly aware that I'm standing in a huge crush of people. No. Not just people. Boys. And girls. Uncureds, all of them, without a hint of a blemish on their necks, at least the ones standing close enough for me to scope out. Boys and girls talking. Boys and girls laughing. Boys and girls sharing sips from the same cup. All of a sudden, I think I might faint. Hannah is barreling toward me, elbowing people out of the way, and before I can even open my mouth she's jumping on top of me like she did at graduation, squeezing me in a hug. I'm so startled I stumble backward, nearly falling over. You're here. She pulls away and stares at me, keeping her hands on my shoulders. You're actually here. Another song ends and the lead singer, a tiny girl with long black hair, calls out something about a break. As my brain slowly reboots, I have the dumbest thought: she's even shorter than I am, and she's singing in front of 500 people. Then I think, 500 people, 500 people, what am I doing here with 500 people? I can't stay, I say quickly. The moment the words are out of my mouth, I feel relieved. Whatever I came here to prove has been proven. Now I can go. I need to get out of this crowd, the babble of voices, a shifting wall of chests and shoulders all around me. I was too wrapped up in the music earlier to look around, but now I have the sensation of colors and perfumes and hands twisting and turning around us. Hannah opens her mouth maybe to object, but at that second we're interrupted. A boy with dirty blonde hair falling into his eyes pushes his way over to us carrying 2 big plastic cups. The dirty blonde hair boy passes a cup to Hannah. She takes it, thanks him, and then turns back to me. Lena, she says, this is my friend Drew. I think she looks guilty for just a second, but then the smile is back on her face, as wide as ever, like we're standing in the middle of street. Anne's talking about a bio quiz. I open my mouth but no words come out, which is probably a good thing, considering that there's a giant fire alarm going off in my head. It may sound stupid and naive, but not once when I was heading to the farms did I even consider that the party would be co-ed. It didn't even occur to me. Breaking curfew is one thing. Listening to unapproved music is even worse. But breaking segregation laws is one of the worst offenses there is. Thus Willow Marks' early procedure, and the graffiti scrawled on her house. Thus the fact that Chelsea Bronson was kicked out of school after allegedly being found breaking curfew with a boy from Spencer, and her parents were mysteriously fired, and her whole family was forced to vacate their house. And at least in Chelsea Bronson's case there wasn't even any proof. Just a rumor going around. Drew gives me a half wave. Hey, Lena. My mouth opens and closes. Still no sound. For a second we stand there in awkward silence. Then he extends a cup to me, a sudden, jerky gesture. Whiskey. Whiskey. I squeak back. I've only had alcohol a few times. At Christmas when Aunt Carol pours me a quarter glass of wine, and once at Hannah's house when we stole some blackberry liqueur from her parents' liquor cabinet and drank until the ceiling started spinning overhead. Hannah was laughing and giggling, but I didn't like it, didn't like the sweet sick taste in my mouth or the way my guts seemed to break apart like a mist in the sun. Out of control, that's what it was, that's what I hated. Drew shrugs. It's all they had. Vodka always goes first at these things. At these things as in these things happen as in more than once. No, I try to shove the cup back at him. Take it. He waves me away, obviously misunderstanding. It's cool. I'll just get another. Drew smiles quickly at Hannah before disappearing into the crowd. I like his smile, the way it rises crookedly toward his left ear, but as I realize I'm thinking about liking his smile, I feel the panic winging its way through me, beating through my blood, a lifetime of whispers and accusations. Control. It's all about control. I have to go, I manage to say to Hannah. Progress. Go. She wrinkles her forehead. You walk all the way out here. I bike. Whatever. You bike all the way out here and then you're just going to go. Hannah reaches for my hand, but I cross my arms quickly to avoid her. She looks momentarily hurt. I pretend to shiver so she doesn't feel bad, wondering why it feels so awkward to talk to her. This is my best friend, the girl I've known since 2nd grade, the girl who used to split her cookies with me at lunch and once put her fist in Jillian Dawson's face after Jillian said my family was diseased. I'm tired, I say. And I shouldn't be here. I want to say, you shouldn't be here either, but I stop myself. Did you hear the band? They're amazing, aren't they? Hannah's being way too nice, totally un-Hannah, and I feel a deep, sharp pain under my ribs. She's trying to be polite. She's acting like we're strangers. She feels the awkwardness too. I wasn't listening. For some reason I don't want Hannah to know that yes, I heard and yes, I got they were amazing, better than amazing. It's too private, embarrassing, even something to be ashamed of, and despite the fact that I came all the way to Roaring Brook Farms and broke curfew and everything just to see her and apologize, the feeling I had earlier today returns to me. I don't know Hannah anymore, and she doesn't really know me. I'm used to a feeling of doubleness, of thinking one thing and having to do another, a constant tug of war. But somehow Hannah has fallen cleanly away into the double half the other world, the world of unmentionable gods and things and people. Is it possible that all this time I've been living my life, studying for tests, taking long runs with Hannah, and this other world has just existed, running alongside and underneath mine, alive, ready to sneak out of the shadows and the alleyways as soon as the sun goes down? Illegal parties, unapproved music, people touching one another with no fear of the disease, with no fear for themselves. A world without fear. Impossible. And even though I'm standing in the middle of the biggest crowd I've ever seen in my life, I suddenly feel very alone. Stay, Hannah says quietly. Even though it's a command, there's a hesitation in her voice, like she's asking a question. You can catch the second set. I shake my head. I wish I hadn't come. I wish I hadn't seen this. I wish I didn't know what I know now, could wake up tomorrow and ride over to Hannah's house, could lie out at Eastern prom with her and complain about how boring summers are like we always do. Could believe that nothing had changed. I'm going to go, I say, wishing my voice didn't come out shaky. It's all right though. You can stay. The second I say it, I realize she never offered to come back with me. She's looking at me with the weirdest mixture of regret and pity. I can come back with you if you want, she says, but I can tell she's only offering now to make me feel better. No, no. I'll be fine. My cheeks are burning and I take a step back, desperate to get out of there. I bump against someone, a boy who turns and smiles at me. I step quickly away from him. Lena, wait. Hannah goes to grab me again. Even though she already has a drink, I shove my cup in her free hand so she has to pause, momentarily frowning as she tries to juggle both drinks into the crook of an elbow, and in that second I dance backward out of her reach. I'll be fine, I promise. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Then I'm slipping through a narrow space between two people. That's the only benefit of being 5'2". You have a good vantage point on all the in-between spaces, and before I know it Hannah has dropped behind me, swallowed up by the crowd. I weave a path away from the barn, keeping my eyes down, hoping my cheeks cool off fast. Images swirl by, a blur, making me feel like I'm dreaming again. Boy. Girl. Boy. Girl. Laughing, shoving each other, touching each other's hair. I've never, not once in my whole life, felt so different and out of place. There's a high, mechanized shriek, and then the band starts playing again, but this time the music does nothing for me. I don't even pause. I just keep walking, heading for the hill, imagining the cool silence of the starlit fields, the familiar dark streets of Portland, the regular rhythm of the patrols, marching quietly in sync, the feedback from the regulators' walkie-talkies, regular, normal, familiar, mine. Finally, the crowd starts thinning. It was hot, pressed up against so many people, and the breeze stings my skin, cools my cheeks. I've started to calm down a little, and at the edge of the crowd I allow myself one look back at the stage. The barn, open to the sky in the night and glowing white with light, reminds me of a palm cupping a small bit of fire. Lena. It's strange how I instantly recognize the voice even though I've heard it only once before for 10 minutes 15 tops. It's the laughter that runs underneath it, like someone leaning in to let you in on a really good secret in the middle of a really boring class. Everything freezes. The blood stops flowing in my veins. My breath stops coming. For a second even the music falls away and all I hear is something steady and quiet and pretty, like the distant beat of a drum, and I think I'm hearing my heart, except I know that's impossible because my heart has stopped too. My vision does its camera zoom focus again and all I see is Alex, shouldering his way out of the crowd toward me. Lena. Wait. A brief flash of terror zips through me. For a wild second I think he must be here as part of a patrol, as a raiding group or something, but then I see he's dressed normally, in jeans and his scuffed up sneakers with the ink blue laces, and a faded t-shirt. What are you doing here? I stammer out as he catches up to me. He grins. Nice to see you too. He has left a few feet of distance between us, and I'm glad. In the half-light I can't make out the color of his eyes and I don't need to be distracted right now, don't need to feel the way I did at the labs when he leaned in to whisper to me, the total awareness of the bare inch that separated his mouth from my ear, terror and guilt and excitement all at once. I'm serious. I do my best to scowl at him. His smile falters, though it doesn't disappear entirely. He blows air out of his lips. I came to hear the music, he says. Like everybody else. But you can't. I'm struggling to find words, not quite sure how to say what I want to say. But this is illegal. He shrugs. One strand of hair curls down over his left eye, and when he turns to scan the party it catches the light from the stage and winks that crazy golden brown color. It's okay, he says quieter, so that I have to lean forward to hear him over the music. Nobody's hurting anybody. You don't know that, I start to say, but the way his words are just edged with sadness stops me. Alex runs a hand through his hair and I make out the small, dark, three-pronged scar behind his left ear, perfectly symmetrical. Maybe he's only regretful for the things he lost after the cure. Music doesn't move people the same way, for example, and while he should have been cured of feelings of regret too, the procedure works differently for everybody, and it isn't always perfect. That's why my aunt and uncle sometimes still dream. That's why my cousin Marcia used to find herself crying hysterically with no warning or apparent cause. So what about you? He turns back to me and the smile is on again, and the teasing, winking quality of his voice. What's your excuse? I didn't want to come, I say quickly. I had to. I break off, realizing I'm not sure why I had to come. I had to give something to someone, I say finally. He raises his eyebrows, clearly unimpressed. I rush on to Hannah. My friend. You met her the other day. I remember, he says. I've never seen anyone maintain a smile for so long. It's like his face is naturally molded that way. You haven't said you're sorry yet, by the way. For what? The crowd has continued to press closer to the stage, so Alex and I are no longer surrounded by people. Occasionally someone walks by, swinging a bottle of something or singing along slightly off-key, but for the most part we're alone. For standing me up. One corner of his mouth hitches higher and again I have the feeling that he's sharing some delicious secret with me, that he's trying to tell me something. You were in no show at Back Cove that day. I feel a burst of triumph. He was waiting for me at Back Cove. He did want me to meet him. At the same time the anxiety blooms inside of me. He wants something from me. I'm not sure what it is, but I can sense it, and it makes me afraid. So. He folds his arms and rocks back on his heels, still smiling. Are you going to apologize, or what? His easiness and self-assurance aggravate me, just like they did at the labs. It's so unfair, so different from how I feel, like I'm about to have a heart attack, or melt into a puddle. I don't apologize to liars, I say, surprised by how steady my voice sounds. He winces. What's that supposed to mean? Come on. I roll my eyes, feeling more and more confident by the second. You lied about seeing me at evaluations. You lied about recognizing me. I'm ticking his lies off on my fingers. You lied about even being inside the labs on evaluation day. Okay. He holds up both hands. I'm sorry, okay. Look, I'm the one who should apologize. He stares at me for a second and then sighs. I told you security isn't allowed in the labs during evaluations. To keep the process pure or something, I don't know. But I really needed a cup of coffee, and there's this machine on the second floor of the C complex that has the good kind with real milk and everything, so I used my code to get in. That's it. End of story. And afterward I had to lie about it. I could lose my job. And I only work at the stupid labs to subsidize my school. He trails off. For once he doesn't look confident. He looks worried, like he's scared I might actually tell on him. So why were you on the observation deck? I press on. Why were you watching me? I didn't even make it to the second floor, he says. He is staring at me closely, as though judging my reaction. I came inside, and I just heard this crazy noise. That rushing, roaring sound. And something else too. Screaming or something. I close my eyes briefly, recalling the feeling of the burning white lights, my impression of hearing the ocean pounding outside the labs, of hearing my mother scream across the distance of a decade. When I open them again, Alex is still watching me. Anyway, I had no idea what was going on. I got I don't know, it's stupid, but I got maybe the labs were under attack or something. And then as I'm standing there, all of a sudden there's, like, 100 cows charging me. He shrugs. There was a staircase to my left. I freaked out and booked it. Figured cows don't climb stairs. A smile appears again, this time fleeting, tentative. I ended up on the observation deck. A perfectly normal, reasonable explanation. I feel relieved, and less frightened of him now. At the same time, there's something working under my chest, a dull feeling, a disappointment. And some stubbornness, a part of me that still doubts him. I remember the way he looked on the observation deck, head tilted back, laughing. The way he winked at me. The way he looked amused, confident, happy. Totally unafraid. A world without fear. So you don't know anything about how it happened. I can't believe I'm being so bold. I ball up my fists and squeeze, hoping he doesn't notice the sudden strangled sound of my voice. The mix-up in the deliveries, you mean? He says it smoothly without a pause or a break in his voice, and the last of my doubts vanish. Just like any cured, he doesn't question the official story. I wasn't in charge of signing for deliveries that day. The guy who was Sal was fired. You're supposed to check the cargo. I guess he skipped that step. He cocks his head to one side, spreads his hands. Satisfied now? Satisfied, I say. But the pressure in my chest is still there. Even though earlier I was desperate to be out of the house, now I just wish I could blink and be home, sit up in bed, pushing the covers off of my legs, realizing that everything, the party, seeing Alex, was a dream. So. He tilts his head back toward the barn. The band is playing something loud and fast-paced. I don't know why the music appealed to me before. It just seems like noise now, rushing noise. Think we can get closer without getting trampled. I ignore the fact that he has just said we, a word that for some reason sounds amazingly appealing when pronounced with his lilting, laughing accent. Actually, I was just heading home. I realize I'm angry at him without knowing why for not being what I thought he was, I guess, even though I should be grateful that he's normal and cured and safe. Heading home. He repeats disbelievingly. You can't go home. I've always been careful not to let myself give in to feelings of anger or irritation. I can't afford to at Carol's house. I owe her too much, and besides, after the few tantrums I threw as a child, I hated the way she looked at me sideways for days, as though analyzing me, measuring me. I knew she was thinking, just like her mother. But now I give in, let the anger surge. I'm sick of people acting like this world, this other world, is the normal one, while I'm the freak. It's not fair, like all the rules have suddenly been changed and somebody forgot to tell me. I can, and I am. I turn around and start heading up the hill, figuring he'll leave me alone. To my surprise, he doesn't. Wait. He comes bounding up the hill after me. What are you doing? I whirl around to face him again, surprised by how confident I sound, considering that my heart is rushing, tumbling. Maybe this is the secret to talking to boys, maybe you just have to be angry all the time. What do you mean? We're both slightly out of breath from hoofing it up the hill, but he still manages a smile. I just want to talk to you. You're following me. I cross my arms, which helps me feel as though I'm closing off the space between us. You're following me again. There it is. He starts backward, and I get a momentary, sick twinge of pleasure that I've surprised him. Again. He repeats. I'm glad that for once I'm not the one stuttering or struggling to find words. The words fly out. I think it's a little bit strange that I go pretty much my whole life without seeing you, and then all of a sudden, I start seeing you everywhere. I hadn't planned on saying this, it actually hadn't struck me as strange, but the second the words are out of my mouth I realize they're true. I think he's going to be angry, but to my surprise he tips his head back and laughs, long and loud, moonlight turning the curve of his cheeks and chin and nose silver. I'm so surprised by his reaction I just stand there, staring at him. Finally he looks at me. Even though I still can't make out his eyes, the moon draws everything starkly, highlighting it in bright, crystalline silver or leaving it in blackness. I have the impression of heat and light, the same impression I had that day at the labs. Maybe you just haven't been paying attention, he says quietly, rocking forward slightly on his heels. I take an unconscious, half-shuffling step backward. I find myself frightened by his closeness. by the fact that even though our bodies are separated by several inches, I feel as though we're touching. What do you mean? I mean that you're wrong. He pauses, watching me, and I struggle to keep my face composed even though I can feel my left eye straining and fluttering. Hopefully in the darkness he can't tell. We've seen each other plenty. I would remember if we'd met before. I didn't say that we'd met. He doesn't try to close the new distance between us, and I'm grateful, at least for that. He chews on the corner of a lip, a gesture that makes him look younger. Let me ask you a question, he goes on. How come you don't run past the governor anymore? Without meaning to, I gasp a little. How do you know about the governor? I take classes at UP, he says. University of Portland. I remember now, the afternoon we walked up to see the ocean from the back of the lab complex, hearing bits of his conversation floating back to me on the wind. He did say he was a student. I worked at the grind last semester in Monument Square. I used to see you all the time. My mouth opens and shuts. No words come out. My brain goes on lockdown whenever I need it the most. Of course I know the grind. Hannah and I used to run past it too, maybe 3 times a week, watching the college students float in and out like drifting snowflakes, blowing the steam from the top of their cups. The grind looks out onto a small square, all cobblestone, called Monument Square. It marked the halfway point of one of the 6-mile routes I used to do all the time. In its center is a statue of a man, half eroded from snow and weather and scrawled over with a few looping curls of graffiti. He is striding forward, one hand holding his hat on his head so that it looks like he is walking through a horrible storm or a headwind. His other fist is extended in front of him. It's obvious that he was in the distant past, holding something, probably a torch, but at some point that portion of the statue was broken or stolen. So now the governor strides forward with an empty fist, a circular hole cut in his hand, a perfect hiding place for notes and secret stuff. Hannah and I used to check his fist sometimes to see if there was anything good inside. But there wasn't, just a few pieces of wadded up chewing gum and some coins. I don't actually know when Hannah and I started calling him the governor, or why. The wind and rain has rubbed the plaque at the base of the statue indecipherable. No one else calls him that. Everyone else just says the statue at Monument Square. Alex must have overheard us talking about the governor one day. Alex is still looking at me, waiting, and I realize I never answered his question. I have to switch my routes up, I say. I probably haven't run past the governor since March or April. It gets boring. And then, because I can't help it, I squeak out, "You remember me?" He laughs. You were pretty hard to miss. You used to run around the statue and do this jumping, whooping thing. Heat creeps up my neck and cheeks. I must be going a deep red again, and I thank God for the fact that we've moved away from the stage lights. I completely forgot. I used to jump up and try to high-five the governor as Hannah and I ran past, a way of psyching myself up for the run back to school. Sometimes we would even scream out, "Hey Lena." We must have looked completely crazy. I lick my lips, fumbling for an explanation that won't sound ridiculous. When you run, you sometimes do weird things. Because of the endorphins and stuff. It's kind of like a drug, you know. Messes with your brain. I liked it, he says. You looked. He trails off for a moment. His face contracts slightly, a tiny shift I can barely make out in the dark. But in that second he looks so still and sad it almost takes my breath away, like he's a statue or a different person. I'm afraid he won't finish his sentence, but then he says, "You looked happy." For a second we just stand there in silence. Then suddenly, Alex is back, easy and smiling again. I left a note for you one time. In the governor's fist, you know. I left a note for you one time. It's impossible, too crazy to think about, and I hear myself repeating, "You left a note for me." I'm pretty sure it said something stupid. Just hi, and a smiley face, and my name. But then you stopped coming. He shrugs. It's probably still there. The note, I mean. Probably just a bit of paper pulp by now. He left me a note. He left me a note. For me. The idea, the fact of it, the fact that he even noticed and thought about me for more than 1 second is huge and overwhelming, makes my legs go tingly and my hands feel numb. And then I'm frightened. This is how it starts. Even if he is cured, even if he is safe, the fact is, I'm not safe, and this is how it starts. Phase 1, preoccupation. Difficulty focusing. Dry mouth. Perspiration, sweaty palms. Dizziness and disorientation. I feel a rushing blend of sickness and relief, a feeling like finding out that everyone actually knows your worst secret, has known all along. All this time Aunt Carol was right, my teachers were right, my cousins were right. I'm just like my mother, after all. And the disease, is inside of me, ready at any moment to start working on my insides, to start poisoning me. I have to go. I start up the hill again, nearly sprinting now, but again he comes after me. Hey, not so fast. At the top of the hill he reaches out and puts a hand on my wrist to stop me. His touch burns and I jerk away quickly. Lena. Hold on a second. Even though I know I shouldn't, I stop. It's the way he says my name like music. You don't have to be worried, okay? You don't have to be scared. His voice is twinkling again. I'm not flirting with you. Embarrassment sweeps through me. Flirting. A dirty word. He thinks I think he's flirting. I'm not. I don't think you were. I would never think that you. The words collide in my mouth, and now I know there's no amount of darkness that can cover the rush of red to my face. He cocks his head to the side. Are you flirting with me, then? What? No, I splutter. My mind is spinning blindly in a panic, and I realize I don't even know what flirting is. I just know about it from textbooks. I just know that it's bad. Is it possible to flirt without knowing you're flirting? Is he flirting? My left eye goes full flutter. Relax, he says, holding up both hands, a gesture like, don't be mad at me. I was kidding. He turns just slightly to the left, watching me the whole time. The moon lights up his three-pronged scar vividly, a perfect white triangle, a scar that makes you think of order and regularity. I'm safe, remember. I can't hurt you. He says it quietly, evenly, and I believe him. And yet my heart won't stop its frantic winging in my chest, spinning higher and higher until I'm sure it's going to carry me off. I feel the way I do whenever I get to the top of the hill and can see back down Congress Street with the whole of Portland lying behind me, the streets a shimmer of greens and grays from a distance, both beautiful and unfamiliar. Just before I spread my arms and let go, trip and skip and run down the hill, wind whipping in my face, not even trying to move, just letting gravity pull me. Breathless. Excited. Waiting for the drop. I suddenly realize how quiet it is. The band has stopped playing, and the crowd has gone silent too. The only sound is the wind shushing over the grass. From where we are, 50 feet past the crest of the hill, the barn and the party are invisible. I have a brief fantasy that we're the only two people out in the darkness, that we are the only two people awake and alive in the city and the world. Then soft strands of music begin to weave themselves up in the air, gentle sighing, so quiet at first I confuse the sounds for the wind. This music is totally different from the music that was playing earlier, soft and fragile, as though each note is spun glass, or silken thread, looping up and back into the night air. Once again I'm struck by how absolutely beautiful it is, like nothing I've ever heard, and out of nowhere I'm overwhelmed by the dual desire to laugh and cry. This song is my favorite. A cloud skitters across the moon and shadows dance over Alex's face. He's still staring at me, and I wish I knew what he was thinking. Have you ever danced? No, I say a little too forcefully. He laughs softly. It's okay. I won't tell. Images of my mother, the softness of her hands as she spun me down the long polished wood floors of our house, as though we were ice skaters. The fluted quality of her voice as she sang along to the songs piping from the speakers, laughing. My mother used to dance, I say. The words slip out, and I regret them almost instantly. But Alex doesn't question me or laugh. He keeps watching me steadily. For a moment he seems on the verge of saying something. But then he just holds out his hand to me across the space, across the dark. Would you like to? He says. His voice is hardly audible above the wind, so low it's barely a whisper. Would I like to what? My heart is roaring, rushing in my ears, and though there are still several inches between his hand and mine, there's a zipping, humming energy that connects us, and from the heat flooding my body you would think we were pressed together, palm to palm, face to face. Dance, he says, at the same time closing those last few inches and finding my hand and pulling me closer. And at that second the song hits a high note and I confuse the two impressions, of his hand and the soaring, the lifting of the music. We dance. Most things, even the greatest movements on earth, have their beginnings in something small. An earthquake that shatters a city might begin with a tremor, a tremble, a breath. Music begins with a vibration. The flood that rushed into Portland 20 years ago after nearly 2 months of straight rain that hurtled up beyond the labs and damaged more than 1,000 houses, swept up tires and trash bags and old, smelly shoes and floated them through the streets like prizes that left a thin film of green mold behind, a stench of rotting and decay that didn't go away for months, began with a trickle of water, no wider than a finger, lapping up onto the docks. And God created the whole universe from an atom no bigger than a dot. Grace's life fell apart because of a single word, sympathizer. My world exploded because of a different word, suicide. Correction, that was the first time my world exploded. The second time my world exploded, it was also because of a word. A word that worked its way out of my throat and danced onto and out of my lips before I could think about it, or stop it. The question was, will you meet me tomorrow? And the word was yes.